Good morning, everyone. I am Dr. Teresa McKenzie. I'm the Accessibility and Veterans Services Coordinator at Ohio University. On behalf of Ohio University Southern, welcome to the 2025 Envision Access Conference. We hope that you learn new information that will help you engage with neurodivergent learners today. I'm also going to be the moderator for this first session. Our first session today is Embracing Diversity, Strength-Based Learning with Neurodivergent Learners. Our presenters today are Kathy Magnuson and Monica Cochran. Kathy is a speaker, trainer, consultant, and the founding director of Wildwood Learning. With over 25 years in education, she combines expertise in trauma-informed practices, nonviolent communication, and strengths-based leadership to empower professionals serving children, families, and youth. A former licensed public school teacher with a master's degree from the University of Minnesota, Kathy champions resiliency-based approaches, believing that leaders and staff can better support their communities when they thrive. Monica has spent over 40 years helping learners of all ages and abilities thrive in educational, hospital, and business settings. She works with learners, caregivers, and educators worldwide in her private practice, Learning Without Borders. She holds a Bachelor of Science from the University of Pittsburgh in Child Development, Social Work, and Early Childhood Education, a Master's in Science Education from Eastern Michigan University, and certifications in Montessori Education, Learning Disabilities, and Emotional Impairment. An advanced DIR practitioner and SSP provider, Monica has also supported brain injury survivors and individuals with developmental challenges since 1997, inspired by her youngest son's journey. The chat window is open for this session. If you have any questions, please type them in the chat window. One of our amazing Ohio University Southern students, Wes Malavenda, will be monitoring the chat. We will pause several times on the sessions as needed for the check the chat for questions. Before the session ends, Wesley will put the link for our survey in the chat. Please take a few moments to complete this form, and thank you for attending. And with that, I will turn it over to Kathy.
All right, thank you so much, Teresa. Really appreciate that introduction, and I'm going to pull up our slides here. And you can let me know, are you able to see my slides?
Not
Nope,
yet.
not yet. Okay.
Oh, there we go.
Stop sharing then.
They were there for a second.
Oh, they were. Okay. All right. I'm going to then reshare them here. Okay. Just 1 second. And Monica, as I'm sharing my slides, would you want to introduce there?
There we go. That sounds good. Yeah.
Okay, great.
So, thanks so much for being here.
Yeah. So myself, I'm Kathy Magnuson, and as Teresa said, that Monica and I are actually in 2 different parts of the country. I am in northwestern Minnesota, and Monica is in Michigan. And we have been presenting together and have known each other for over 10 years. And this is just one of our presentations that we have put together and co-hosted. Monica has a organization called Learning Without Borders. Mine business is called Wildwood Learning, Training and Consulting. And so we just really welcome you here today. And I'm going to pass it over to Monica to start.
Sounds good. Thanks, Kathy. And I will apologize. I don't think I'll be sneezing too much. Hopefully my antihistamines are working here. We got some nice weather and all of a sudden my allergies started. So, but I do, so grateful to be here and thank everybody for taking time out of their busy lives to come and learn a bit with us today. But I always like to start with the question, and you can throw this in the chat, is what do you already know? What do you know about diversity and neurodivergent learners? One of my things that I like to ask everybody before we start teaching is, what do you already know? And that's one of my strategies for working with neurodivergent learners is to ask them, what do you already know? And that kind of starts us. So I'm going to take a look. You can just throw those things in the chat and we'll keep going because we're going to do a little bit of a kind of a grounding exercise to get us all in the present moment. So if you can just throw into the chat what you already know about this topic. We do have some flexibility in our presentation, so we can, add more here. If you always say, I know a lot about this, we can minimize different parts. So that really helps us if you can let us know what you already know. And I'll turn it back to you, Kath.
Yeah. So we like to start our presentations with a little grounding activity. It's always great to start with a grounding activity. So I'd like invite people to sit up straight in wherever they're at. And if you want to close your eyes and just listen to my voice, or you can keep them open and just gaze down. But we're going to really key in to our five senses, because when we do that, it's bringing it all back into our body. And so often we get caught up in our thoughts, but let's bring it back into our body. So take a deep breath and slowly let it out. And as you're looking around your space, what are five things that you can see? And just, you can name them off, since most people are muted, or you can just put them into your thoughts. But what are five things that you can see? I can see my phone. I can see some markers. All right, take another deep breath. Slowly let it out. And what are four things that you can touch that are within reach? What are four things that you can touch? So I have a rock here. Maybe you have a pen. I'm going to take another deep breath in. Slowly let it out. What are three things that you can hear? Let's just get quiet. What can you hear? Take another deep breath in. Slowly let it out. And what are two things that you can smell? What are two things? Maybe you have some, like I have oils here. My coffee, I can smell my coffee. What are two things you can smell? One last deep breath in. Slowly let it out. And what would be one thing that you would like to taste? If you could taste something, what would be that one thing? So taking a moment to just ground ourselves, this is a fun activity to do if you're working with children, if you start feeling or seeing that they're getting dysregulated or you're getting dysregulated. It's one that you can just really dive into and say, hey, what are some things that you see? Let's see if we can smell. And it's just a really great grounding activity to bring you back into your body and your senses. So today, we're going to hand it back over to Monica to talk about who are the neurodivergent learners.
Yeah, and I think, we use the 5 Ws a lot, so we're going to probably run through those a bit, but who are they? They may be people with sensory, you know, differences. They may have anxiety. They could have experienced trauma in their lives. And that's, we call them big T's and little T's, Some people experience systemic trauma. It could be the brain that runs too fast. It could be people who process information uniquely, or it can be people who get easily dysregulated. So I appreciate what people are putting in the chat because it is a broad term and it's one that it's only been around for about 20, 25 years. So it's a new term at all. So we want to go to the next slide. And we have a lot of labels for these people. And this is just one of the many, many, and I won't go through all of them. But we put labels, and then once we put a label on people, it kind of puts them in a box. And what we hope to do is to open that box and not have people in boxes with a lot of generalizations. So we'll go to the next slide here, Kath, and you can go forward.
Yeah, and so often in our education system, we are looking at that deficit model. You know, our education system here in the United States is really trying to fit kids into a one size fits all model. And to do that, we're chipping off the edges of those children and having them try to fit into something that just really doesn't fit them. So we're going to ask you to just take a moment, pull out a piece of paper and something to write with. And we love to have activities. So there's going to be different times in here that we want you to just take a moment to do an activity with us. And once you have your piece of paper and your pen, I would like you to write your name 5 times with your non-dominant hand. So take a moment, and once you have written 5 times, you can do like your first name. You can do a shortened version of your name if that helps. Like I definitely would go with Kathy instead of Catherine. And once you have it done, either you can hold it up to the screen, show it, or in the chat, write done. Take a moment. And I'll just let you know too, over here I have my dog in the office with me. He's my vice president of operations. He sits in the chair. And so if you hear a little woof a little bit, yeah, I apologize. All right, we got some people. All right, so I see people are putting in there done. I would like to find out how did that feel? Well, first look at it. Look at it. How does it look? How does it look? And you can unmute yourself. We're totally okay with that.
Unrecognizable is my name.
Yeah, unrecognizable.
Same here.
Okay. How about anybody else? How does it feel? How did it feel doing that?
It was very difficult.
Oh, yep, go
Yeah.
ahead. Difficult, right? Very difficult, you said? Awkward, I see in the chat, frustrating. What else?
Unfamiliar.
Unfamiliar.
Yeah.
I had to concentrate beyond belief to try to use my opposite hand, my non-dominant hand.
Yes. Yeah, thank you for sharing those out. It looks like a first grader wrote it. Somebody put in the chat. Uncomfortable, right? Okay, so now take your dominant hand and write your first name 5 times. And put done in the chat when you're. Oh, yeah. These done. Got somebody.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm seeing those dones coming in much faster, right? At a big, faster rate. And so how does that look? How does that look? Yeah, much better.
I can read it.
You can read it. It looks neat. Anybody else, if you want to unmute or put it in there, how did it feel to do that? Legible.
Easy.
Easy, right? It just flowed. Yeah. Wrote it fast, right? Didn't even have to think about it. Comfortable. So we like to use this activity because it leads into talking about strengths. And that strengths are just who you are. They come easy. They don't take a lot of time to think about. They help you to the way that you see the world and help you to do the work that you do. Sometimes you even think like, oh, everybody knows this. Everybody knows how to do this. But honestly, they don't, because you have a unique set of strengths that help you to be you. And actually studies have shown that these strengths are really coming forth at a young age. In fact, they followed children all the way from the ages of 3 up to 26, the same group of children, taking periodically looking at their personality and their strengths. And what they found in that research is that the strengths and personality qualities shown at age of 3, were very much the same ones at the age of 26. So our children come into the world with these strengths, and we know that the first 3 years of their life are so important in developing them and looking at that our strengths are something that we are just naturally part of us. So we're looking at doing a shift, a real paradigm shift. And one day a woman was looking out onto her neighbor's laundry when they were hanging laundry outside on a beautiful sunny day. And as she was looking out at that laundry, she was telling her husband, you know, they always are hanging out dirty laundry. I don't know why she's hanging out this laundry, but every time I look at it, it just doesn't look clean. And then the next day, she came to the window. She was looking out upon it, and she said, wow, what happened there? Their laundry looks clean out on the line. And her husband turns to her and says, well, honey, dear, I washed the windows. So we just have to recognize what kind of lens are we looking through, because that lens is a lens of, are we looking through what's wrong with a person? And then in our trauma-informed world, we like to switch that lens to what's right with that, what's happened to that person. But really, in a strength-based, resilience-based lens, we're looking at what's strong, what's right with that person. And that really takes a awareness of our own lens that we're looking through, and then coming to maybe the window with curiosity and wonder and asking questions and cleaning off our own lens, recognizing how we're looking at things. Because just imagine if we had schools out there that actually help kids identify their strengths. And I'm just going to ask real briefly, if you're not muted, to mute yourself. Thanks. And that they were able to explore them and their talents and do this from a really young age. Just think how their skills would grow and over the 12 years, instead of letting them follow the same routine, leaving them confused and in a life after graduation. And this is really the lens that Monica and I come from. We come from a strength-based, resilience-based lens, and letting people know that we all have strengths and that we can take into account by managing our weaknesses. So I'm going to turn it over to Monica for this next slide to talk about how can we do that? How can we bring out learning in a strength-based way?
And thanks, Kathy. Part of what we need to do is we have to expand our notions of what learning looks like. If most of us have gone through traditional education, and in traditional education, rote learning is the number one. So there's a lot of models. You can use Gardner's model. There's a lot of different models for education, but this is one of my mentors named Brent Cameron. He's from British Columbia. Unfortunately, he's passed away already, but he had come up with there's like what we call the paragon, and there's 8 different ways of learning. So if you begin looking at, we don't really give a lot of credit to it, but there's modeling, and we learn by imitating. We call it in school copying, but it's really, imitating is part of it. Enthusiasm. People are very enthusiastic, but sometimes they don't finish things. But that's a way of learning too. And often, if we can hold space for that, they can come back. There's the rote learning, certainly, but there's also forming an identity as a learner. Right. And then there's also, the heuristic and the goal setting. And then there's, mentoring, which we don't do a lot of in our education system. And then there's also what I call synergistic learning, which is more like that project base. But out of it all, if we do this and we stay present, we begin to get a sense of what our life purpose. And when you look at those 26-year-olds whose strengths we looked at in New Zealand when they were 3, we begin to see patterns in their lives. So we want to use the positive patterns to go forward. So go ahead and we'll look at the next slide, Kath. So we know this is all important, but for some, there's a good biological reason we don't focus on it. And the reason we don't is that we're born and we've survived as a species with a negativity bias. That's what's kept us safe, and it's kept us protected from predators and whatnot. But now our predators are numerous, right? But they're not the physical predators anymore. And we used to think, oh, okay, if I have one positive for one negative, it'll all be fine. I used to say, and this is from the work of Dr. Gottman, you need 3 positives for every negative to survive. You need 5 to thrive. In a workshop last year or 2, someone said, no, you need 9. So I just say you need many, many positives for every negative to keep that connection going with the learner, with no matter what their age, because they need to feel safe with you. And so we need to shift this paradigm into noticing what's working, not just what's not working. And then we'll go to the next slide, Kathy. One of my mentors is Dr. Stephen Porges, and he created the polyvagal theory. And again, I don't know how many people are familiar. You can just let me know in the chat if you're familiar with the polyvagal theory, but it's a theory that we need a level of safety to be able to learn. And one of his basic thoughts is if you want to improve the world, start by making people feel safe. And I'll just give you a brief introduction to it so that you understand the framework we're working with. If you want to go to the next one, Kath. There's 3 organizing principles of the polyvagal theory. One is hierarchy. The second one is neuroception. And the third one is co-regulation. So I'm going to go ahead, if you can go to the next one, Kath. I'll start with the hierarchy. And this is basically our autonomic nervous system. This is operating below the level of consciousness. And our body is always asking, how safe am I? How safe am I in this situation? And that's not just physical safety. It's something we call felt safety. And when I'm safe and social and engaged, I can learn because now I'm accessing the prefrontal cortex, right? However, when I start falling down, I get mobilized, I get agitated. I can't find my papers, my slides aren't working. All those little things. I can't sleep because I'm nervous the next day. I'm already moving down my autonomic nervous system into what we call sympathetic activation. Often we call it fight and flight, right? And then if we stay there too long, or we're just overtired, we get sick, we drop down into what we call dorsal vagal. And these are not good or bad. The issue we have to do is we have to be able to move. We need to be able to move on the continuum. And if you go online, you'll see there's about 20 different models now. And there's blended ones, but we don't have enough time to do all that. This is just a brief introduction. But again, there's a lot of models of it now. And Dr. Porges came up with the theory in 1994. So we've been we've had it for a while now. So it's being used more in mental health. We're hoping to move it into education as well. And, medicine, all different places. You want to go to the next one, Kath? So one of the second key principle is what we call neuroception. And that is, what is my perception of safety, danger, or life threat? And there's three different ones. It's the one we feel it inside our body, like I'm not feeling well, my stomach's this, the world's not safe. Then there's my outer world, what's around. And it can be as much as I've got a tag in the back of my shirt here and it's really bugging me, or those lights aren't working, or there's too much noise in here. So, having that outer world, how am I with my environment? How is my environment and how are we getting along? And the third one is between relationships. Do I feel safe with this person? Yeah, do I feel safe in our context educationally? Do I feel safe enough to learn here? Or am I having to defend myself? So that's neuroception. And the third one, I'm going to let Kathy go ahead and talk about the third principle. Oh, no, I'll tell
A
you
little
why
bit about the
before we
Vegas
do that.
one.
Yeah, I'll tell you a
Go
little.
ahead.
Some of you might wonder, why is this happening? What's the physical mechanism for this? And basically, we have two bundles of nerves, cranial nerves that come out of the base of our brain. We have 12 of them, but this one is the vagus, and it goes to every part of your body. It goes to your heart. It's what makes your eyes get wide. It's what makes your heart beat faster. It makes your hands sweat, right? And it can affect your gut, right? Meaning because if I'm in life threat, I don't have to worry about how my gut's digesting my food, right? So, but the difference here, the reason Kathy and I talk about this is that 80% of the information is coming from the body to the brain. So we all know the amygdala gets triggered, but we haven't backed up to where do they get that information? And that information is coming from the vagus nerve because it's sending messages to our brain that we're in danger. And sometimes they're good and they're accurate, and sometimes they're not. And that's why we have to have this third principle that Kathy's going to go and talk about.
Yeah, so talking about this, polyvagal theory really brings into the importance of also co-regulating. So co-regulating is really when we're finding ways that we can calm down our nervous system, ways that we can regulate our nervous system. With children, the adult is one of the pieces of co-regulating. They cannot regulate themselves very accurately or very often, especially young children. But think about even in the teen years when children are having hormones and adolescence and puberty. So as adults, and we know that the brain really isn't fully functioning or fully developed, I shouldn't say fully functioning, fully developed until the age of 26, 27, or mid 20s. And so being able to co-regulate is a real skill to bring in that calm. And there's lots of different ways that we can co-regulate. If you think about maybe what brings in calm for you, what brings your nervous system down to where you're feeling safe and social, it could be that you go on a walk outside. You take a few minutes, you take a walk, and it really calms yourself down. It could be that you're able to sit by water, and water is the thing that really calms yourself. Or look out the window even. I love it when I have windows in my offices and the sky's blue and I look out and I just can calm my nervous system down. Also, things like relationships with the neuroception. Monica was talking about how we need to have that relationship of asking, am I safe? Is this person able to trust? Adult children relationship, that's what that child's asking, and being the one that you can calm yourself down. There's lots of things that we can do. Music is a great one, rhythm. If you notice, like with elementary teachers, a lot of time you're doing a rhythm, stomping your feet, because then that gets you into your body. Gum chewing is one. Until I knew about this polyvagal theory, I didn't realize, and I have just a brief story about how in a classroom they gave a student gum to chew. And before that, he was one that was blurting out all the time. Then the next time I came into that classroom, I noticed that he wasn't doing that. And I said to the teacher, why? And she said, we gave him gum to chew because that muscles in here are ones that help to calm into the nervous system. And so there's lots of things, but co-regulating is so important as far as the polyvagal theory, and just as far as like having that way to regulate ourselves and others. And then getting us back into that social engagement. And on this diagram, it's down at that bottom, but finding a grounded joy. And where that little wiggly line is in between fight and flight and social engagement, that's actually play and learning. Because if you think about how children and how we play, you get a little bit like excited and engaged, and then you go back down. Or it might be you get a little bit like frustrated with like learning something new, but then you get it and you go, oh, I got it, and it goes back down. So staying in that social engagement, using co-regulation, the neuroception, and then just realizing about our nervous system. Because really knowing our strengths can lead into our well-being. When we know our strengths, and Deb Dana is a social worker who does quite a bit with the polyvagal theory. Monica knows more about her, but it's just that it is not simply the absence of problems, she says, but the presence of strengths. And when we can tap into our strengths, then we can tap into solving problems.
That's good. So a little bit, I want to talk a little bit about, we talk about meeting students where they are. And that's where co-regulation comes in. Because when we're meeting students where they are, we can facilitate the learning. Because oftentimes learning isn't transfer of what's in my head to yours. Often learning is developing a skill. It's helping meeting the student where they are. And I call it, oftentimes, it's coming in what we call sideways. Okay. And one of the speech and language pathologists I met a number of years ago wrote a book called Declarative Language. And declarative language is not giving so many directions to kids. We do a lot of directing. Take out your books, do this, do that. And some of that's very helpful. Another way, though, is to say it's time to get started. For a parent, dinner is on the table. So using more what we call declarative language, more observational language, because kids with these spiky profiles, sometimes, and they have therapies they go to, and we do a lot of talking over them, right? So this is a way of just noticing and saying you're being seen and heard, and sometimes it's just as much as a hand on a shoulder saying, I notice this is frustrating for you, right? So if we can use a little bit of declarative language, I wonder what the next step would be, right? It doesn't demand a response. So if we can use some language that doesn't demand a response, then we can find a competent role. And that's another piece, Kathy. And this has to be authentic. So this is where I said, meet the student where they are, meet the learner where they are, meet your colleague where they are. Then we have to find where are they already competent? And then we can do that. And competence can look a little different too. Um, you know, and my classic example is when a kid wants to do something like, I want to make scrambled eggs, right? And they can't break the egg yet, right? Because you're going to have a bunch of eggshells in your scrambled eggs. So you find what's the competent role for that kid? The competent role means I'll break the eggs and you stir, right? If they're okay to be at the stove, you're the mentor. You're standing next and noticing. I'm noticing the the eggs are going out of the pan, right? I'm noticing. You don't have to say, don't do that, right? But we have this tendency, and it has to be authentic. Okay. And this is the next thing. You can't contrive it, you can't pretend. So kids can tell a phony, in a minute. So it's really important that our role really is. And often that means we have to join into their activity. And this is where following interests and following their strengths, we create a partnership. It's not, I have all the information and I'm going to make sure you have it and then you're going to give it back to me. It's a partnership. And it could be as simple as, oh, the one where we say, go clean your room, right? Well, you know how that works. But if you went in together with a kid and they might not know where to start, let's let's pick up all the clothes. I'll hand you the book and you put it on the shelf. That's one way to have one. But the deal, it needs to be contingent. It needs to be important that we're there. Another one could be, I use some examples that are easier, but you can just notice their activities, that they're able to do it. And that partnership role can also be when you're doing something together. And this will be another household thing because it's easy to describe. Like I have the dustpan and you have the broom, and we're going to work together to get the floor cleaned, right? It can be with little ones, I'm going to hold the paper and you're going to snip, right? Or I'm going to notice oh, I'm looking at all your math problems. Here's all the ones you got right. Tell me how you did that, right? And you have them show you one they already know how to do. And my experience has been 50% of the time, they notice the ones they got wrong. But again, it's coming in a little bit sideways, but I'm not just grading your paper. I'm coming in as a partner to help you learn. Another one is parallel. We're going to do it at the same time. We're both going to do something. We're both going to watch the video together. And maybe I'm going to stop it along the way and we're going to have a good conversation, right? And then sometime it can be reciprocal, right? It could be playing a game where we're taking turns. Sometimes that's way too high, though, just to let you know. Sometimes they're not ready to take turns with you. And that's what we're asking a lot, in a classroom. We're asking them to take that turn. I'm talking and then you're talking. Sometimes they can't do that yet. And we need to honor that this is a kid who can't participate in that. But we can do things together. I don't know if you've had this experience. Two of us pushing a cart down the hallway. I've had some of my best conversations with kids, right? Because we're parallel. We're doing it together. If it's hard for them to join in, make it easy. Make it easy. Make that step into the conversation easy. Often it helps to give everybody a role. I have a role to play. I'm the one that does this. I'm the one that does that. And then they're not like in a lost space. So these are just ways of co-regulating that facilitate learning, right? So declarative language, not putting kids on the point all the time, right? Helping them have a competent role. Find competent roles for kids. Make sure it's authentic though. You can't make them up because the kids can tell. And then see if you can work on having things be contingent, like let them know, I need you here, right? We're doing this together. It's not you have to do it all by yourself. Kathy, you want to go to the next one? Okay, so this is what I call the secret sauce. So we're going to chunk back up to a higher level. Okay. And I didn't get a chance because I know we're going to be out of time here soon, but these are different ones for different ages. Okay. And if you can, I was going to
And
say,
if we have a few minutes at the end too, Monica. you
okay,
could
maybe we can
talk
do it
about
at the
that
end.
because,
Yeah.
we're pretty good on time.
Awesome. That's great. But I think, part of this, when you have multi-ages, the secret sauce is to make sure that you're looking for the strengths in your learners, right? And we have some resources at the end that will help you with that, but it's a different paradigm shift. And if we're not intentional about looking for strengths and talents, you know what comes up? I look at a paper, like someone hands me a paper, I see the spelling errors right away, right? Because that's very quick. But unless I'm not looking for coherence, if I'm not looking for clarity, I won't see that. So my favorite one, you have a kid in your class who just talks all the time, right? Well, you need to give that person a role, because they're not going to just stop. They're not going to not be who they are. So look for the strengths, look for the talents, and sometimes they're hidden. It's hard to see them. It's like this, the girl that talks all the time. She's can do communication, right? She's got presence. Let's find some ways. The kid that doesn't write well, and we don't have to give it a label. It's just hard for them to come up. Maybe have more than one way of showing what you know. And I know there's some difficulty with rigor and things, but the reality is that everybody needs a way that works for them to demonstrate their competence, right? So we have to broaden our lens on what learning looks like and what assignments look like too. So looking for strengths and talents is number one in your sauce. Number two is using their interests. I've done tons of tutoring over the years, and when I can find a way to use a learner's interests, then they learn the skill. If we're doing paragraph writing, and we know a kid is interested in cars, right? I have a learner I've worked with on and off for 10 years. I know more about cars because of him than I ever would, right? But you have to I'm going to get curious about their interest just for 5 minutes. And so if we're doing an essay or we're doing a paragraph, well, why don't you tell me about the difference between the old Mercedes, when things were more manual and they are now? All of a sudden, they know a lot to write. So if we can start with their interest, and sometimes it means getting interested in a video game, right? That I'm not really interested in. But, when I was running a group about 10 years ago, when Minecraft first came out, I got an account and our learners set up a whole village. They even made a coliseum out of those square blocks. I mean, that was pretty cool. But again, they said, Monica, you're in the slow lane. You can't even crawl up the thing. That's true. They built my house. They did all these things, but they demonstrated their higher order thinking skills. They demonstrated what they were learning. They were willing to write about it. We discussed it. We talked. We did a lot of conflict resolution, but I had to join in to their interests, and then we could bring them back. I call it wooing them back to what we're learning. And the third one is safety and connection. Whoops. I think I just lost my site.
You're there.
I'm there. Okay, good. Because
Yeah,
it just told me I needed to reload. I said, oh no, that's
No,
not good. Thanks for
you're
letting me
good.
know. Yeah. And this one really, it's third here, but it is the most important. We've got to create that sense of felt safety with the learner. As soon as they're not in that place and we keep trying to teach, there's no learning happening. Right? So that's where we have to stay in a resourceful enough place that we can maintain that sense of safety. And that means sometimes not talking. It means doing it with our body. It means doing it with our tone of voice. And it's the sauce. And we have to find our ways. How do we connect with the learner, whether it's at the college level, whether it's at the high school level, whether it's adults in training? I've got to connect. I've got to connect. When I worked with engineers, I made sure I read all the sports pages the night before, right? I made sure I met them at the door because greeting them at the door made them feel more comfortable. And then when I went to the front of the room, they're with me, right? And I always say, but I couldn't get them to uncross their arms by about 10:30. We weren't going to get much done, right? So you have to watch the body language. And but we have to also make sure, which is why Kathy and I have been talking, we have to know our own strengths. If we don't know our own strengths, then we may try some of these things. Even some of the things I'm suggesting, maybe go, I don't know, that doesn't sound like me. Okay, if you know your strengths, my number one strength is learner, input, ideation, connectedness, individualization. Kathy shares a lot of the same ones. It fits the work I do. And sometime in our schools, we're not looking at it broadly enough so that we can create that connection. We can create that felt safety. There's a concept we didn't have time to talk too much about, is we call it the vagal break. What happens? How can we put a brake on us being in fight and flight? What's the brake that brings us back into safe and social? And another person, if you're interested, is Lori Desautel's. She's doing a lot of work in the public schools on helping kids understand their own nervous system and adults knowing their nervous system. So we know how we come in. And with some kids, it's okay to talk about your feelings, but for other kids, we've got to go all the way down to the sensation level. Like, where are you feeling this in your body? Like, I'm noticing my hands are getting sweaty. And sometimes it takes us being vulnerable in a classroom, in a group to say, this isn't working for me because I can tell my hands are sweaty. I can tell. And then I know it's challenging when we're in a conflict situation, but in that conflict or when a kid is melting down, that's not the teachable moment. At that moment, you need to help that learner get through that moment. And that's why you need a toolbox of strategies to be able to do that. And for me, I'm very short. I don't have to get down to kids' level. So I'm right there usually. But for other people, it means getting down to their level, right? For other people, I don't have I don't today I have a Lauren Bacall voice. I don't usually have a deep voice, but sometimes for guys, it means modulating your voice so it's not so booming, right? Because that can be seen by a kid who's already dysregulated. The only one that I get, I guess I smile a lot. And when I'm thinking, the kids would say, are you mad? Are you upset? So just being aware of my body language. What's it saying? What's my tone of voice saying? How am I? And that's how I'm co-regulating. So I don't realize that when I'm thinking, my forehead gets furrowed. And that's a scary thing for kids. So what we want to do is make sure we have the capacity. And if we don't, I need to be candid with kids about this. Like, this isn't working for me right now. Or I didn't sleep well last night, right? And so you might notice that I stumble over some words today. But what you're doing is you're validating. You're validating what they're coming in. We talk about kids not eating breakfast and coming to school hungry. Can you learn when you're hungry? No, I can't learn when I'm hungry. But some kids can't even notice it, right? There's three other senses we didn't have time to talk about. And one of them is called interoception. And that's, am I noticing what's happening in my body? So one of the big things for educators for that safety and that connection is to begin to notice before we're dysregulated, because Bruce Perry, Dr. Perry is another one of my favorite people. He said, you have to be able to loan your regulated nervous system to the kid that's dysregulated. So a dysregulated adult is not going to be able to help a child or another learner. And even my partner and I, we've been married for 49 years now. We both can't be flipping our lids at the same time because that does not work. Somebody has to kind of stay in the room and be able to do that. I think we want to leave some time for some questions here. So when we do these things, this is when we have learning. This is what learning can look like, right? And sometimes the reading I'm training my dog to be a therapy dog, but it's amazing. Dogs are very unconditionally accepting, right? So I have had a lot of learners be able to learn to read by reading to their dogs, right? Because they're accepting. Sharing what we're doing, looking at things together, sharing a laugh. Humor is huge, as long as it's positive humor, right? There's a level of sarcasm that doesn't work, but this is what joyful learning can look like. And if we have just the old model where everybody's paying attention to me because I'm talking and they're all quiet, that's not the only model of learning, and it's not particularly useful for the world we live in right now. We need a lot more collaboration and creativity and communication. We need a lot of those skills. And we kept saying those were 21st century skills, and we're a quarter of the way through the 21st century, and it's still hard for us to incorporate those ideas. But this is just a taste of what we talk about, but I hope it helps you a little bit. Kath, you want to go to the next one?
And I was just going to add here too that, recognizing the trauma and effects of trauma is something that we bring into our presentations
Yes.
quite often, especially with educators. And so just recognizing too how trauma plays a part in the not just neurodivergent, but in all children and children's lives and your own.
Yeah. And just to piggyback on what you were saying, we call them the big T's. We see those big T's, but trauma is in the eyes of the beholder, right? The person. So it can be a little things that might not bother you. It can be traumatic for a child. And again, because I work a lot with neurodivergent kids, school sometimes is trauma for kids, right? Because it's not a place they feel competent. It's not a place they feel like they belong. And it's just you noticed how hard it was to write with your non-dominant hand. If you can only imagine going every day and having 6 hours a day of learning in ways that don't work for you. So we hope that you got some strategies today, some ways, some mindset changes, right, of how we can do that.
And we have a number of lots of different resources. We'll have a slide here. And if you want a copy of our slide, we also would like to, as educators, we're always looking for feedback on, what we did well and also what we can improve upon. So I put into the chat, or you can pull up your phone and go to the camera and shoot the QR code, which will take you to a form. It's just very short and quick. And this will also allow us that we can then stay in touch with you, let you know when we have other presentations coming up that we talk more in depth about both trauma and strength-based. And I know that this is a high-level overview of neurodivergent and how to work with neurodivergent learners. But as both Monica and I say too, the adults are the ones that need to then be the drivers of the strength-based learning, seeing that within children. I always say that there's nothing more preventative than an adult with a regulated nervous system. So us having the ability to regulate so that we can co-regulate and bring these in. So please take a moment to fill out the form. We would be more than happy to stay connected with you and let you know what other things we're offering in the future.
Very much. And as we said, this is an ongoing process for you. If this, depending on how familiar you are, or this might be very new to you. These are our intro ones, that help you kind of get into this idea, these thoughts. And again, we don't promote any one way of looking for strengths. Use the way that works for you. You can do strength spotting. You can do Clifton Strength Finders, you can do VIA. There's all different kinds of assessments, values, and action. But again, looking at your own strengths first, and then you're going to be able to see the strengths in other people. If we had had a little bit more time, we had one other activity that we wanted to do, but it really does help that you look at your own strengths. And then once you look at your own strengths, then you can begin to see the strengths of others. All right. Thank you so much.
Well, and before we end, as I said, we have a number of different resources on this slide, but we are also have lots of resources on our websites. I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, sort of, but I do have YouTube videos that I've been putting out and blog posts that I've been putting out. And you can all find that linked at my website, which is wildwoodlearning.com. And when you sign up for this in our form, and then I also see that Wesley put another form in there. And then Monica, do you want to talk about how they can continue to connect with you?
Right. And again, I have a website, Learning Without Borders. So you can certainly connect with me there. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn, on Facebook, Instagram. I have a YouTube, but I haven't been doing very many YouTubes lately. But I just came back from a 3-week trip to New Zealand, Australia, and Thailand, and went to a summit on pathways for differently for pathways to graduation and post-secondary in non-traditional way. So I'm kind of excited. We'll be probably blogging more about that in the next month or two. But again, you're welcome to connect with me there. I do consulting for schools as well, and organizations. And I also work with parents. I work with educators, and I still do some work with kids. Primarily right now, I do work with kids, young people that are transitioning, that transition from high school to college, or, oh, I don't have a major yet. I don't know what to do. Or, oh my gosh, I'm all the way through college and I still don't know what I want to do. Um, just sometimes those people kind of get drawn. And again, we look at it from a strengths perspective, and try and help them work with micro schools. Usually those kids are somewhat learn differently. And so I can come in and help the teachers figure out their programming. So it's been wonderful. Thank you for having us. We've got a few minutes for questions here. So
Yeah. So I'm going to stop sharing our slides and if, yeah, go ahead.
I had one question. Early in your presentation, I saw the word neural minorities. Can you tell me what that means? I've never seen that phrase before.
okay. Basically, it just means I don't learn in the same way that the majority of people learn.
Okay.
Okay. Or my brain is wired in a way that is not what we consider neurotypical. Okay. So you are in a minority, and that automatically is stressful, right? Because our school system is set up for the majority, and
Okay.
it's not set up for the minority, unfortunately. If we were a little bit more inclusive, it would not be as hard for a person to feel like they belong. Other questions? I hope that helps,
It
Teresa.
does.
Other questions?
So I have several.
Okay,
Yeah.
go for it,
Yeah,
Teresa.
go.
So my next is, you talked about helping students transition from high school to college. Most of us, not all, but a lot of us are either college students or we work with college students. What does that look like when you think about it from strength-based and the different approaches that you talked about? What would that look like for us? Or what would be a good way for us to get started trying to help that transition?
Okay. Um, Hopefully the transition's starting before they get there. Okay. Because with the learners that I work with, my goal before they transition is these are my strengths. These are the things I'm not good at yet. And here's what we found that works. Because when you can come to a college counselor, and I have friends that work in disability offices, and you go to the front of the line because she says, "Oh, you already know your strengths. You know what you're not good at. You're not coming 6 weeks into the semester after you just failed your first test, right?" So ideally, it starts before. If it doesn't, and they're there, you say, "Okay, this is a speed bump." Right? Hopefully, it's early enough in the semester that you can help them. And then it's where you have to make a repair, right? They need to make a repair. And sometimes the person in the disability office can help with that, or the instructor can, and that's where we have to see it from a different lens. You know what? It looks like you missed some steps here. And truly, the one that's the hardest is getting up and going to bed on time. If you can't manage getting up in the morning and getting yourself to bed at night, then you're not going to have the capacity to do the things you need to do. I know it sounds basic, but getting kids in high school to set their own alarm clock and get up and not intervening to make sure they get that A. Because there's something to be learned by not getting the A. But it means we can't get upset about it. Okay, this is something we need to work on, right? And staying engaged and making sure the content never is more important than the connection. And that's hard because we're there with a purpose, right? But if we lose the connection, then we don't have a sphere of influence anymore. All we have are carrots and sticks, right? And that can get you through a tough moment.
And I,
It's not going to carry you forward.
and I think too, it speaks a lot to having safety and connection
Yes.
and making sure that all students feel safe and connected. And that goes for at any age.
And if you have questions and you want to email either of us, we'll respond to your emails, or if you want to set up a time. Like I said, I think sometime we stir some thoughts in your head, I hadn't thought about it this way. I hadn't thought about it that way. And it can be, and we may have stirred up some uncomfortable feelings too. And we know that sometimes that's how we learn too. Hopefully we kept it safe enough for you to learn today too. And because I often, when I'm working with students, will use myself as a personal example, right?
Okay.
And that helps too. Then they know you're human. That's why you tell them when you haven't slept well. You say, sometimes I'm not as prepared as I'd like to be.
So yeah, thank you very much for having us, and we really appreciate your time.
Yeah.
Thank you both. We appreciate you taking time to talk to us. Wesley did put the link for the survey in the chat window. I will probably send it out again later today to
Thank
everyone who is in attendance, just in case you don't have a chance to grab it. We are going to take a 5-minute break, so our next session will start at 11:05. So thank you both. I learned a lot. I took lots and lots of notes.
Good.
Thank you very much for having us as part of
Yeah,
your
we
conference.
appreciate it.
We appreciate it.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.